Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of What the Field, a podcast by Crowd Farming, where we talk about all things food and farming. So today we're joined by Analisa Winther, who's here with us in person. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
So Analisa is the co-founder of Top 50 Farmers and also has her very own podcast called Future Food. And we share a common mission here at Crowd Farming and Top 50 Farmers, which is how to make regenerative agriculture the norm rather than the exception. But before we tackle this big question, maybe we can just start with an easier question, which is who are you and how did you get into this space?
I came into this space, like many people, when I was growing up, I wanted to have an impact. And I spent a lot of time, a lot of energy, even before university, in deciding what I wanted to study, thinking, how can I best use my gifts to create an impact and better our world? And that led me down the path of technology first, and really looking at how can we use technology to solve the sustainable development goals and the biggest challenges of our time. And I was very much immersed in the world of entrepreneurships and startups and how we do venture capital investing, angel investing into technologies like nanotech, biotech, AI, 3D printing, you name it. And over time, I became a bit disenchanted because I kept hearing the same story again and again that this technology is going to save us. And it felt like there was always another technology, like we just did this one and that wasn't it, and now it's this one, and when is it ever going to stop? So fast forward, I ended up working for a company that went bust overnight, and I was left unemployed. And I was really left to sit with myself in this regenerative journey of trying to figure out, what am I going to do next? Like, I didn't have a plan B. Now I'm going to find something. And in that period of just having to sit and be unemployed and sit in the discomfort of that, I realized that food is everything. And when we solve for food, we solve for each of the sustainable development goals that we see, because food sits underneath all of them. And this was my light bulb aha moment that very much, first I still started in technology looking at very up-chain food system solutions. But the more I studied, the more I learned, the more I realized that soil is at the basis of everything, and that food really is a technology just like nature is a technology. And nature has been a technology that's perfected over billions upon billions of years, and is very much something that we can take inspiration from, though we don't always think to start there first. So I just did a podcast with the Biomimicry Institute. I'm currently super obsessed with biomimicry, and I would recommend anyone to look into it. But really going back to that place of how do we ask nature first for inspiration and design and co-create with nature versus starting from this egocentric place of I have the idea, I have the solution. Yeah. Do you want me to share, too, how I got into Top 50 Farmers?
That was my next question.
Perfect. I mean, it's always good to understand where the person is coming from. Yeah. So about 2.5 years ago, my co-founder, Cindy Christiansen, approached me and said, we have this idea. Would you want to do it? And like any co-founder who has started something, you never quite know what you're signing up for in the beginning. But I said, yeah, that sounds like an amazing idea. And the idea that she pitched me was, we've heard of World's 50 Best, we've heard of the Michelin Guide, and we've seen, both of us come from Copenhagen and Denmark, the rise of Nordic gastronomy with many of the best restaurants of the world sitting in Copenhagen. And what that has done for the chef community, but also for the global culture of chefs and hospitality, gastronomy, and the relationship that people have with their plate and the inspiration they get from it, the openness that it brings when you have these encounters. And more than anything, how chefs have really been elevated to having platforms with multiple revenue streams, big businesses. They are a brand, whereas a couple decades ago, it was a job that few people wanted to do. So the idea of Top 50 Farmers was born out of a very collaborative environment. It was a conference where a bunch of people had come together to talk about how do we scale regenerative agriculture in Europe? What would that look like? And one of the people there threw out the idea of, well, what if we made farmers famous? Like, what if we made them rock stars like chefs? Not a super novel idea. I've had so many people come up to me since being like, I had this exact idea. I just never did anything about it. So Cindy was the brave one who raised her hand and said, okay, but we'll go for it. We'll do it. And will you help us out and find the way? So one of our core values as an organization is collaboration, and it's very much in our DNA and our roots that started from day one.
Amazing.
And Analisa, the question that arises from your kind of introduction of Top 50 Farmers is, why do we need to change the perception of farmers? What's wrong with the image we have of farmers, and why do we have to change it and for them to become stars. Yeah.
Totally. My favorite way of sharing this is that if I did a test right now and I went out on the streets, we're in Madrid, and asked the first person who walks by me, who's your favorite chef? They would be able to name someone. They probably own the cookbook of someone and they have someone they look up to. If I ask that same person, who's your favorite farmer? I hear crickets. And I hear crickets even from people who are foodies, even from people who go to the farmer's market every single weekend. They don't actually know the name of the people that produce their food. And what that does when we have that level of anonymity is that we don't value something as much because we don't actually realize who's behind it. And we all know that food takes a lot. Growing a carrot is actually a lot of hours. It's a lot of sun. It's a lot of water. It's a lot of time. But still, people go into the grocery store and they expect their food to be cheap because the narrative we've been told again and again and again is that you want the lowest price. You see supermarkets competing always on who has the lowest price, the lowest offer. And in reality, we need to start valuing more and more what actually is happening in this food and what happens. So our theory of change is really that when you know your farmer, it starts to change that whole relationship that you have with your plate. And beyond that, we need more diverse role models in this industry. We know that throughout the European Union, less than 12% of farmers are under the age of 40. So we are already staring down the barrel of a generational crisis and a big question of who's going to take over the farms in the future. Who is going to grow our food? If you're a young person today and you look at the role models that we have, you probably don't have someone that looks like you or that inspires you. And there is a stereotype of like a 6-year-old bald white guy on a tractor, living in the middle of nowhere. There's no life. The kids want to move to the city. Maybe they've even seen their parents do backbreaking work where they didn't make a lot of money, where they had to literally bet the farm to make it. There's no vacation. I mean, it's a pretty sad story in terms of why should I go enter this field? And yet, I know, and I have met so many farmers who are showing a different path. But they're not necessarily marketeers. They're not necessarily the ones who are going out and saying, here's what we're doing, here's why it's amazing, because they're super busy growing the food and running a business. So that's part of our role to say, these people already exist, these farmers, these entrepreneurs already exist, but they need a spotlight. And how do we find out about them to enable that then to ripple out and to grow and people to really connect with what's happening locally in the regenerative movement that's growing?
And going back to the connection between the food and the chefs and people not knowing who the farmer are, who the farmer is, it seems like there's this broken link of people wanting to cook good food and looking up into chefs and looking for recipes, but then the connection to actually the product quality and what product quality means, it's super lost, right? So, and it's difficult for people because, yes, I know I've got a tomato. I know kind of the end goal is that it tastes good, but where do I find this good quality? What production methods are the best ones so that it turns out into quality? And where do I buy it? Because it's normally, again, about price. Like if I thought some time ago, where do I find this produce? I would go maybe to a supermarket and look for the very expensive tomato, and that would be kind of and the looks of the product, and that would be kind of the indicator I would choose.
Yeah.
And those are super wrong because normally not super pretty food. It's amazing quality, it's amazing methods, and not always kind of the super beautifully put in the shelf. It's the best one, right? So how are you kind of driving this transition into how people actually kind of see food and get the link to the source? Yeah.
Totally. So I would say it follows the idea of a rising tide lifts all boats. So every year we select 50 diverse role models from across the European Union. We're speaking now in 2025, and we just announced the first cohort. So the youngest farmer we have is 26, the oldest is 70. They come from 22 countries across Europe, and the smallest farm is half a hectare, the biggest is 4,000. We were very deliberate in choosing as many diverse farmers as we could find to showcase that there are different business models and different ways of entering the market. And that question then of how you really translate quality is a communications question, because we're starting from a place where so many people have lost that connection to where does my food come from, but also what's seasonal, what's fresh, like
What's local?
yeah, what's in local sometimes isn't even the like necessarily the best. It's a very complicated question in that regard of, and it's confusing for consumers to look at how do I eat the right thing, meaning I want to be regenerative, I want to be sustainable, versus like I also have to watch my budget and everything else that's going on. So what we're seeing within our cohort now is that many of the farmers are selling direct to consumer, or they are feeding into restaurants or a city that is closer to them. So there are clear connections in that path. And I think for many consumers, you can really feel it in the taste. And of course, you have to sometimes buy it to then see it, but I certainly can feel how alive a product is that was regeneratively grown and the taste of it versus something that it's like been dying on the shelf for months, and losing its nutrients day by day. You just can feel it. Like you can feel that life force getting transferred from the tomato to you or anything else to you. So refining one's taste buds is certainly helpful, and more than anything, being willing to ask questions. So the number one thing I tell people is to just ask, like, where is this from? Where was it grown? When did it, you could, if you really wanted to ask the supermarket, when did it arrive or anything else? Or buy directly from crowd farming where that quality assurance is in place. There's different options, but you have to build your own relationship circle so that you're sourcing in a way that does make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, so Top 50 Farmers is obviously very like farmer centric, but I'm curious as well as to how consumers or like civilians or viewers or whoever is on the other side of that, how are they engaging with Top 50 Farmers, and what is your goals to get them involved in this as well?
Mm-hmm. So right now, finding out who is a regenerative farmer in my country, in my neighborhood, is pretty hard to do. And if you go to top50farmers.org, you can see the beginnings of a map where we are showcasing these best-in-class role models, their stories, how you can visit them, how you can support them. Everything is there. And we really see Top 50 Farmers as a platform or a one-stop shop to make it easier for people to figure out, what can I do? Like, where can I enter this? We definitely have a primary point of departure in the farmers because we want to see more farmers entering this profession. And the more farmers there are, the more food grown this way, the more we can sell that down to the consumer, where the percentage right now is pretty small compared to how much other food is grown in other ways. At the same time, on our Instagram, our newsletter, and our LinkedIn, every week we share 2 farmer profiles. And that is something where we already see a lot of people following us because they're curious. They want to know, they want to learn. But it's definitely a group of people who are foodies, who are turned on to this, who know about regeneration. I'm half American and half Danish, and in the United States we have further development of regenerative brands, meaning even when you walk into a supermarket, you can look for that kind of label or you can see that in the marketing and the explanations. Here we mainly see organic and biodynamic. So that's not necessarily the same, or bio in general. There's more communication work to do there overall. It hasn't gotten the market penetration where when I go to a dinner party, if I say I work with regenerative agriculture, people go, what's that again? Like they can kind of figure it out, but they don't know. It's not a clear path for where can I buy this?
Totally. So how's the process of Top 50 Farmers? How do you select farmers? And then I have so many other questions, but let's start with the beginning. Yeah.
Totally. So we do an open call. Anyone can apply for Top 50 Farmers. And one of the things that we did that I think is the most brilliant, going back to how do we spread this, is that we enabled anyone to nominate a farmer. So whether you're a chef that works with a grower who is doing amazing work, but they would be a little shy, they would maybe not dare to go apply themselves and say, oof, I'm going to put myself forward. Somebody can nominate them, a family member, a friend. They still have to fill out an application, but it's that social nudge to say, I really think you should do this and you're worthy of that opportunity. And sometimes that's all that's needed to get someone to go, yes. So we open up applications typically in late October, November, and then we have a selection committee that goes through, and we are not the full deciders of that. It's the selection committee that reviews everything. Each application is reviewed by about 3 people. That's going to depend on the number of applications we get year on year, of course, to manage it, but we really thoroughly read everything. And You have to be registered as a business to apply. There's a bunch of other criteria you say yes to, and we ask a bunch of questions about your farm, your philosophy, your vision for the future, because by joining Top 50 Farmers, you are agreeing to be a role model for the industry. And it's really important for us to, one, understand, how did you get into this? Some people were soldiers before they became farmers. Others started at age 36. It's a second career for them. Others have been on family farms where they've been doing it for 6 generations. All of that's super interesting to show that it doesn't matter your background. You are welcome into this space, and that you can do it if you're committed to it. And what did it look like to actually make that transition? Same with farmers who have been conventional and then decided that they wanted to be regenerative organic. Everybody has a unique story. So we consider all of that, and then once we get the 50 who are selected, we not only do the spotlight of them, but they also become part of a recognition program, because we didn't want to just say, here's 50 amazing farmers. Next year we choose 50 more, because this is not a ranking. Again, it's like we want more, every year more, and that's how we're going to really grow this industry, grow this movement overall. But we also want to grow the farmers' businesses. So how do we do that? We need to understand what is going to be the needle-moving activity for them in terms of how do they get further into the market? What are they looking for? Is it a machine? Is it some form of investment? Is it that they just really want to talk to another farmer who's doing what they're doing and share knowledge? And then we design a custom program based on the responses in their application and listening sessions we conduct where we go deeper into those answers, and very much a regenerative mindset of building within context and building from the ground up based on what they tell us. So then they have a year-long opportunity to connect with the other members of the cohort, and we bring in different speakers or thought leaders where they're able to provide information on that.
Sorry, just a quick question. How many applications did you receive this
We,
first year?
yes, we always go, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality.
Yeah.
Because so easily we go to a place of going, how many?
Yeah.
I can candidly say we got 114 in the first year,
Okay.
which is awesome. Like,
Yeah.
given that we are new and that this is the first time and people also have to trust us and see what we do, I think there's no harder group to earn the trust of than farmers. They
Yeah.
already have so many demands on their time, and they're like, oh, who's this person coming in? Like, what do they want now? So we were very, very, very proud of that. And, you know, if you go on our YouTube channel or even on our website, you can see their application videos. And that in itself moved our team members to tears. Some of them wrote us saying that just filling out the application was such a joy and huge for us, because we're entrepreneurs and we hardly ever take a moment to pause and celebrate. So having to sit down and reflect on the journey we've been on and how far we've come and what's interesting or amazing about that is a really big deal, because your to-do list is only ever getting longer, never shorter. It's kind of classic entrepreneur stuff. But that made us so happy. And we've been very mindful in our communications that while we can only choose 50 every year, we hope you're going to apply again, because our goal is that we just feed more and more people into this, and we can increase that spotlight, that regenerative agriculture becomes the industry standard once again, right? Because this is how we used to farm. This isn't something new. It's just a return to what we've known and a remembering.
And in terms of the actual regeneration, like, how are you kind of keeping an eye on the fact that the farmers are in fact regenerating? Is there any kind of like outcome-based results that you guys check, or do you like go over the practices that they've been implementing with them? How do you kind of guarantee that the regeneration is happening on these farms?
Yeah, so we don't do ground truthing where we go visit every single applicant and see their farms. That would be pretty crazy. We are relying a lot on social proof, meaning if we're going to shout your name from the rooftops and you lied on your application about what you're doing, that's only going to come back to hurt your business. And we also have very clear code of conduct guidelines around what we look for in role models and what we expect from them. And if you break that, you're out. But it's also something, you know, when you check the terms and conditions, like, yes, I agree to this, I agree to this, I agree to this. Again, it's really important to stress that regenerative is not a destination. Mm-hmm. There's not one moment in the journey where you arrive and go like, A for the day, you did it. It is a mindset and a philosophy and an approach and a way of being. So that's why we have farmers who are 1 year into the journey, because that's interesting. That's going to inspire someone who's thinking of just getting started and very much on that path, as well as farmers that have been farming for decades, and maybe their parents were farming that way and their grandparents were farming that way. All of it is important for showing that path and that journey, and that each one teach one. You know, you want someone a little bit ahead of you that can inspire you and to see how you can grow and do things in different ways and really share that knowledge and those practices.
And so, sorry, super quickly. So I think that, like, I often get the feeling that there are some farms that are super good at marketing themselves and that have kind of understood the language and the narrative and the communications around regenerative farming. And then on the ground, they're not necessarily the ones that are implementing or that are creating the most regeneration. And then there are some that kind of operate in the dark, right? Who are doing incredible, super impressive things, but who maybe are not interested or just are simply not marketing themselves.
Yes.
Did you guys do any type of like identification work of maybe finding farms that are doing great things, but who maybe wouldn't be the type of farms to apply for this kind of opportunity and stuff like that? Like, did you guys do any also invitation from your side?
We didn't. I would say that both of those are important. So we know that there's lots of farmers out there who are not marketing themselves, for sure. We were very proud that I would say half of them have a presence and people know them, or they've been in European circles before, maybe speaking at conferences, maybe in other capacities. We do see a huge theme with all of the farmers that they are really, really interested in the civic side of things, meaning how do we change the laws to make regenerative farming more possible, because it is so difficult right now and it's designed for monoculture, not for a diversified farming business. And that they are doing a lot when it comes to education and teaching others. So they're really interested in that concept of how do I give back? How do I keep growing this? We have folks on our advisory board who are very deep in this space and have been here for years. And even they were like, I don't know half the names on this list. And that's super interesting and very exciting for all of us to go, there's more than we know. And we just have to find them. But they also have to be able to find us because, again, we're talking about people in rural areas. And they may be the only regenerative farm in their neighborhood who's doing this and not be sure. And how do I get plugged in and connected to the networks? Which goes back to where we see the Top 50 Farmers website as a potential, because we want to list out this network where you can see here's the nonprofits and the education institutions that if you're interested in undertaking this journey, here's who can support you locally, because we operate on a European level. So I say all of that because it was a consideration in terms of stories, because again, it's the diversity of the stories that is really important, and showing all the different ways we can do this. Not necessarily like the best, because what is the best? That is a very subjective.
Yeah.
Like, what would you say? The best regenerative, what does that mean?
Yeah, and as you said, it's a journey, right? So it doesn't
Yeah.
really matter where you are in the regenerative journey as long as you're on the path, right?
Yeah.
I think it's really cool what you were saying about the diversity of models, because at the beginning, when you were like when we talk about the new generations and kind of the idea we have of a farmer, the thing is that if we only present this really cool new young farmers pursuing regenerative agriculture, then we're going to miss all of these other farmers
Totally.
that maybe have been conventional for a while, they believe it's the way to go, they're older, they're not willing to change. If you only present them one type of role model, then it's difficult to encourage them to change. And they have been, like, farmers overall have been so stigmatized, so blamed for so many things. It's difficult if you don't show them this diversity of role models, right?
Yeah. And this is a huge culture shift because we're used to competition. This is a collaborative model and we're looking at an ecosystem. We know that nature is healthy when it has a lot of diversity, and we want to then create the same when we're thinking about building this, that it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but more everyone has a contribution and everyone brings something to the table, and how do we learn from that? How do we work from that? And we face resistance in this every day because it's people are like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I don't quite understand. But we don't want to miss out on anyone. And it's not a point of finger, you didn't do it this way. You're not regenerative yet. Like, you're so far behind. I'm not going to want to get started if you've told me from the beginning I'm doing it wrong. And I will have to, like, because again, we have to remember that most farmers have, if they start young, have 60 harvests in their life, 60 chances to run the business. So if you're thinking of just starting now, but maybe you're going to retire in 10 years, you have 10 opportunities to do this. It's a much longer term perspective than that, and which is also why it's like, we can't just show people that have been doing it forever. It's also the doing it now, and that you can start at any point and it's going to make a difference. And you see that personal transformation too when people really start working with nature, how that changes how they think about everything.
And then it's very hard to admit that you've been trying and convinced that the way you're doing things for the past 40 harvests is the best possible way, and then no, rethink again. There's things that you could do differently. That's super hard, and
Yeah.
we should understand. And another thing, so you wish for them to become a role model, but a role model for who, for which people, and how do you intend for them to kind of pursue in this journey of becoming role models? Is this something you're going to like communicate about during this year, or is this something they should be doing with the community, and how are they doing it with the community?
Yeah. You already are a role model. You don't have to do more. You already are. You're doing something amazing and difficult, and that very few people are doing right now. So just by sharing your story, that has a huge impact for someone. And again, it's not about the quantity necessarily of the people we reach, because what I've seen is that stories plant seeds. And you don't know when that seed's going to be harvested. You've all heard a story where it touched your heart, it's been living in the back of your head, but it might be 3 years before you're suddenly like, oh, now that's hitting or that's making sense. So that's a little bit more the philosophy that we have in terms of, I don't know the impact of you learning about this farmer, but that might lead to something else or open something else. And that's what's so hard about communications, is that it's super hard to measure. You don't necessarily know what the impact of this conversation will be and how someone will listen to it. And that might change something for them, unless you write us and tell us how it impacted you. Maybe you'll do that. We love to hear from you. But that's really key. So it's not about doing more. You're already doing the most. It's about understanding that you are already worthy of being a role model just by the journey that you've undertaken. And as you mentioned, it takes so much humility to admit, I don't think I've been doing things the right way, and I'm going to completely transform my business. That's huge. I super respect that person who's able to admit a place where they go, I actually believe this now, and I changed my opinion, and this is why. That's going to inspire a lot of people. And that's not something that we see, because we're always touting what makes us amazing, right, in that capacity. So part of the service that we do provide as being part of Top 50 Farmers is that we help to figure out the angle of your story, and we do share each of the profiles we publish with the farmer to go, is this right? Like, does this feel good to you? But most of the time, nobody's ever written their personal interest or life story, so it's amazing to see, like, that's me. Like, that's exactly, it's not complicated. It's super simple. And we thought that when we announced this list, because each of the farmers is amazing, like, truly each of them has such an incredible story, that journalists would be all over it. And they were, in the sense of being like, this country has 4 farmers nominated for the top, or like named as the top 50 of Europe, but less so on those personal interest stories of why are they a fascinating character or person we value in society. So it just goes back to show the work. Like, we do tons of spotlights of athletes, of chefs, of local news in this capacity, but the farmer doesn't get that yet. And that's really where we're going back to how we value, how we see the worth. And worth starts so much with yourself. If you don't value yourself, if you don't think you're a worthy role model, if you don't see yourself as a role model, why is someone else going to? It starts with you.
It's true, but I remember the other day we were talking about, like, you were like, from what I understand, the people that you reach at the moment, as you were saying, they're foodies, they understand English, they like,
Yeah.
it can be huge because it's at a European level, but it has some limitations to actually transforming things on the ground, because most probably a lot of farmers on the ground are not watching you yet. So what I refer to as being role models is the interesting response that I found from you. It's those people go back home and they become role models at home in their own language, in their own land, etc. Right? So how are these people actually, like, just by farming and the results they're having, or are they actually kind of, some of them, creating a movement on the ground to actually change things on the ground with people that maybe you're not reaching directly, but because you're giving that person like the security in themselves to actually, you are a role model, and this is how you can tell your story, and we've selected you amongst these many farmers, kind of, I guess this has an impact on this person to actually, I'm going to go back home and kind of start doing more to convince people this is the way to go, because now I have kind of, I'm more secure to do it, right?
Yeah. I think to be honest, most of the farmers are already doing a lot in their communities.
Okay.
That's part of what makes them an interesting story or role model. But I keep going back to it's the diversity. It's really different because it's not our job to tell someone, you got this opportunity, now you have to do this.
Okay.
They are in charge of their own businesses and how they're ultimately going to do marketing and where they're going to take this and how they're going to use that recognition. Think of a restaurant getting 3 Michelin stars. Of course, it brings more business. It gives them a stamp of this is amazing, and you see how that they become more of a magnet in that regard. Top 50 farmers will be like that over time, but then what you decide to do and how you run your operations is up to you.
Okay.
But we definitely see that the farmers are getting more opportunities to speak on stages in front of politicians. There is a certain gravity that comes with, I am one of Europe's best farmers, and this is, you can leverage that, and you have a whole group of people behind you who support you. You're not just by yourself. There's 49 others. So, and that's just going to grow year by year as we get more people in and more alumni and more, folks you can call and say, I need this, or what have you done about that? But it's each person's choice at the end of the day what they're going to do with it.
And what do you do with them along this kind of year that you're working with them? And is that community formed amongst that 50 farmers so that you later can say, as you were saying, I have 49 other people like backing me up and advising me on what to do, and yeah.
Yeah. So one, we have a platform where the farmers can easily connect with one another and, think of a Slack or something like that. You can write someone and say, hey, I want to talk to you. But also make requests or share events or other opportunities that might be useful for the group. We see already that the farmers are amazing and that they really support each other. So they share each other's stories and they comment on each other's stuff. And they're just as excited to read the profile of like, who's this person? Because getting to know 49 new people is a lot of people. It takes some time to network to that degree. So they're also very curious to learn about one another. With the recognition program, it changes year by year based on the farmer's needs. But for sure, there's areas where investment is a huge topic. How do I get more funding? What kind of funding? What's the right vehicle for my business in terms of how that's going to grow and how we move this needle? For others, it's farming practices. Like if there is a bunch of syntropic farmers, they just want to nerd out on what they're doing and like have that space to talk about it. There's an element of who's doing something really great. So there are some farms that have full marketing teams, and they've done a great amount of work to figure that out, and they can share with the community saying, here's what we did well, here's what we wish we could have done differently. One of the tips we heard recently from a farm named Amadeco, which is in Italy, in the Salento area, is that they said it was so important for us to actually document with videos and photos our farm's process and our journey, because just like everybody wants the data measurements of where was your farm 5 years ago versus now, you want the same in the photos of the transformation. So while you're at the beginning and you feel like it maybe is ugly or you have nothing to show or whatever, that's the best time to take the photos, because 5 years from now, it's going to be a different story. So we need to be thinking from that long-term point of view of there's a before and there's an after, and how are you moving in that direction? So that's alerting I wouldn't have thought of unless I heard it from them. Goes back to it depends on what people say they need. But yeah, there's a huge amount of topics. We're very open in terms of what does the farmer want? What's the needle moving activity? Let's make it happen.
So you listen to their needs. They form this kind of community in which they can talk amongst each other. And then based on their needs, you provide them with the experts or sessions or whatever.
Totally.
Okay.
And we definitely heard that the farmers right now are probably most excited to learn from one another because so many are experts in some area. So more than we need more external people, it was like, no, I really want to connect, I want to.
That's amazing.
And many people know the farmers in their country, but to find farmers in Estonia and find farmers in Lithuania, it's like, oh my gosh, across all of Europe, this is happening. What can I learn from them? What's the story in their country? There's a lot of richness in that that we're just beginning to tap into and see.
And so the consumers can find out who the top 50 farmers are, engage with the content that you guys are creating, and maybe also serve as a boost to share and blah, 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 and then buy directly their products as well. Is there has a community kind of been created on that side? Do you see that now there's also kind of these spaces where also the consumers are thinking oh, did you see this farmer though? Did you I just discovered this one, you should check it out, and that kind of thing?
We are tracking shares, and that's the best way that anyone listening can help is if you share the farmer stories on your social media. We then reach a further audience and draw more people in. We also, with many of the farms, they have open farm days, events, workshops, agro-tourism, dinners, like things that you can go to experience. So you'll see on our Instagram, it's like farms, fields, and food, like very luscious, such beautiful places that you just can't wait to go. So thinking a bit from that destination perspective when we're talking about marketing and what works on Instagram and what people are excited about, we have had people write us saying that they're just so excited about having a source where they know every week I get to meet 2 new farmers. Like a young woman from Ireland wrote us saying, like, I have been searching for inspiration. This is a goldmine for me, and I just have to open Instagram and then it's there. That's fantastic. I'm like so excited to see who are these people, what can I learn? We've had people in Africa write us saying, like, this is so cool. I can't wait to learn from these European farmers. Same with folks in Brazil and other places where there's a lot going on with agriculture. So I do think there's even a global perspective. We're just at the beginning in seeing what happens with the first cohort and how that grows. But the best thing anyone can do is share the farmers' stories and go visit them. Buy from them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so what would you say is like your long-term vision for Top 50 Farmers? Like, what do you think it will look like in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah. Our long-term vision is that regenerative agriculture will be the industry standard once again. So our job is done when we get to that point that buying regeneratively is super easy. And it is common practice day in and day out. I think in terms of how the organization will grow, it's always such a juicy question, but we do see a plethora of farmer role models, and that the Top 50 Farmers brand name really does carry weight and integrity like we see with World's 50 Best, with Michelin, with other such organizations, and that there's stronger connections in the community of the farmers, but also in that network, that it becomes much easier to step onto this path of regeneration. So we're trying to help make the road that it gets a little bit easier to walk on, because right now I think it feels like you're going through a jungle and bushwhacking to find the path and make the path. It isn't a very clear path. I would say that's our vision.
That would be very cool.
And I think this question is kind of related to that one, but how do you envision that Top 50 Farmers is going to help solve or face the main challenges or of the agri-food system today? And kind of what's the ideal you see in the future? Like, thanks to Top 50 Farmers, this is the different way in how people buy their food, source their food, find their farmers, or produce their food. I think you already responded to that one, but yeah.
I mean, litmus test is that if I go back on that street and ask someone, who's your favorite farmer, they can name someone.
Okay.
If that actually happened culturally, that would be, imagine what our world would look like. That's a pretty big shift we're talking about. I also think that the availability of regenerative products being so much easier, that we get that trust again of like, I know this was grown well, this was made well, maybe even you know who does it, that would also be huge. We are not there yet. Like, that is a long, long path. But I do think it happens from that grassroots perspective. So the more that we can know who are these people who are growing in this way and how can we support their businesses and make it easy, the faster it's going to go, because all of us have power in terms of where we spend our dollars. And then it's really a question of, are you taking action?
And the other day we were talking about what is, and we went over it like really quickly, what is quality in food and how does all of this movement of regenerative agriculture relate to that?
Well, I know that everyone is so excited about nutrient density and considers that the big unlock. We're not quite there in being able to prove that food grown in this way is more nutrient dense than in other ways, but I believe we're on the cusp. I think it's going to for sure be in our lifetimes at least. So one, I think it gets, again, to transparency and information. I do believe you can intuitively feel it. Like I was saying before, you can taste it. You can feel that, but not everyone is connected to their food in that capacity. But wouldn't it be great if they were?
Yeah,
You know?
totally.
I still remember the first time that I had a carrot that was just pulled out of the ground, and I treated this little carrot with so much care. Like, how will I cook it? This is amazing, completely different than my supermarket carrot where I was like, chop, 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 done. I didn't think about it at all. So
Totally.
it's a relationship thing. It's deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we get to the point that it's, you get the feeling, so you're like, oh, I can definitely feel that there's something here. And then when the time comes that there's data to prove it as well, that's like such a solid validation of the fact that you can feel so deeply connected to your food, right? 'Cause
Totally.
then you have the science to kind of prove that in a sense.
Yeah.
It's like intuition. You have to develop it. If you have not been training it for a long time, it kind of goes numb. I guess it's the same with tasting the like good food from good soil, etc. But there is, I'm super hopeful that there will be more. But there is a lot of studies relating soil health with nutrient density. So I guess it's about having more, and actually what you were saying, bringing that information to the general public that maybe it's not so well known. And also, how are you going to get to know it if you don't know what practices or even where the product comes from? It's super
Yeah.
difficult. Yeah.
And this is connection. I'm repeating it, but so often where we got to where we are right now in our food system is because we see ourselves as better than everything else as humans versus as a part of the overall ecosystem. And that changes your interrelationness with all things. I remember visiting one farm where we walked around and I was like, this place feels kind of messy. It's like pretty wild. There's stuff it's not a classic field where everything's very manicured and perfect. And what she told me was, isn't it amazing that everything I can see, I can touch, I can feel, I can eat? That is abundance. And I was like, oh my God, I've never walked through the streets, in a city, nothing is edible. It's concrete. That's it. What does that then do to my relationship
is
of how
even
I
your
view
life.
abundance?
Yeah.
Yeah, precisely. But I'd never seen the world from that point of view of another farmer said, like, for me, being rich, why I farm is that I have the freedom to eat what I want of the highest quality, and I have that abundance all around me. I have that life force all around me. I've just never spent enough time I grew up in New York City. Like, it's a completely different way of thinking and being. So that goes back to the most basic form of we are part of nature. We are not separate from it. But so much of our lives creates that separation. So it is a very deliberate act these days to go back into connection and to see it and to feel it differently. But it's very intrinsic. We all have it.
Yeah, the way we see it, at least the way I see it, this connection that we're also trying to bring from society to farmers, it's also about commitment. So you, as a person, commit to a farmer in the sense that I want to know more about how it was produced. I want to know more about, I want to pay a fair price for this because I have a commitment to you and I know, and that's why we launched adoptions, things like this. But it's also a commitment in the other side. When you're an anonymous person, a farmer producing just to enter the supermarket anonymous world, you're not committed to creating the best quality. You're not committed to creating a really tasteful product because no one is going to trace that back to you.
Yeah.
And that no one is going to value that. So I guess that commitment, it's actually just going to go for the best because we both know each other. The consumer knows who's producing it. If you disappoint me, I'm going to choose someone else. And it goes the other way around too. So I think that connection, it's only going to make us better and more committed. And yeah.
This is how we've done business for generations. Like that's the old way of doing things,
Yeah.
right? That it's very based on our relationships and that trust and that we all need to figure this out together because we're all going to grow together. And that goes back to the stories we tell. We have one farmer, Ken Pertel, that is doing heritage grain flour in Ibiza, and she worked with the local bakers to actually make a market for local flour. And they took a bet on her and said, we really want this because we want the flavor. We would love to source it here. So we're going to pay you more or pay you a fair price in the beginning, even though production isn't precise every year and it's developing and it's growing, but because we all want this and that's going to support our businesses in the long run. That's a commitment from both sides to say, I want to see this grow. And as consumers, we have that ability to say, I'm committed to seeing this industry grow, so I'm investing more now. I'm paying a higher price, and I do think we generally need to pay more for food and have that idea and that notion of what it should cost. But that is a commitment we can make to say, I want to invest in seeing this industry grow because it's going to improve my health and the soil health and the climate health in the long run.
Yeah, and I guess like stories create this engagement creates commitment, and then if you have that commitment and you care about something, you're just not looking for the best price and the shiny looking produce, you're looking for something else and you're committed to something else. So I guess that creates kind of long-term relationships between farmers and consumers. Totally. I have one last question that it's super stupid, that it's why 50 and not 10 or 100.
I don't think we have a great answer to that. We've kicked ourselves multiple times being like, why did we say 50? That's a lot. It's actually a lot.
It's a lot. Okay. That's
Even in every way, it's 50 relationships to manage, and it's going to grow every year by 50 more. So we are preparing for that future. But 50 sounded like a good number. Comes off the tongue in a good way. Didn't think too hard about it.
Are you worried that you'll ever run out?
No.
Okay.
And I love that people already feel the scarcity, and we're just getting started of like, what if we run out? It's like the whole point is that there's more. There's people we don't know, and we're adding more every year through this inspiration and attracting that next generation and more people to come into the fold. Yeah. So I don't think we're ever going to have that problem. No.
Good. I think it's true. I mean, as it goes forward, more farmers will become regenerative as well, and as the movement grows, you'll have an abundant source of 50 farmers every year.
Yeah, totally.
Do they ever get together, like, presently?
Yeah.
Or is it online?
Well, we just launched literally last March 2025. So we're recording this now, it's in May. So it's been a very short period of time. But immediately we had one farmer say, I want to host everyone at my farm. And we put a date in the calendar, so that will be at the end of the recognition program.
Amazing.
And again, this goes back to if the farmers are close geographically or they build a relationship with someone, why wouldn't you go visit them and learn from them? One model I love is that I come from a business background. I studied international business and innovation and business development. But a lot of times the best way to learn is seeing how someone else does something. So there's something called the group of 20 where you have 20 people come together. They completely open their books. So you would come over to let's say I ran a car dealership. You come to my car dealership. You get to see and critique everything. And then you tell me the feedback that you have because you're also running enterprises and you go, oh, you could do that differently. Or why are you doing it that way? That's kind of silly. And the person who's receiving it, the CEO receiving it, cannot respond to anything until the following day. Because, of course, what happens when you get feedback?
Feelings.
You get defensive and your ego comes up. So you're not really receiving any of it. So you have to sleep and then you come back and then you can rebuttal or you can say that was actually a very good point. But I've heard people who have been part of those kinds of groups say, I learned just as much being the person giving the feedback and seeing other models of how it's done as being the receiver. So this whole idea of giving and receiving, that's also very much the culture we aim to create, going back to an ecosystemic point of view. I'm super nerdy about organization building, and I also work as an executive leadership coach for folks in the industry. So my bread and butter is entrepreneurs and how do we build organizations that also reflect where we want to go and the kind of world we want to live in. It's in the food, but it's also in how we are as people and how we run things. So all to say, I think it's super, super great if anybody wants to visit each other and that they become friends and inspire each other. And we only help when we actually share more.
The other day I was thinking that now that we're asking the AI so much for feedback all the time, is it going to make us more humble or not because it's a machine? I don't know.
More humble in what sense?
Because you're asking for feedback all the time and it's telling you this is not right, this is not right. Will it make us more humble or not? Or accept feedback better or not at all because it comes from a machine and it's totally anonymous and no one's going to know that it gave you that feedback. I don't know.
ChatGPT is just so polite.
Yeah.
And it always gives you a compliment first.
Yeah.
It's like, that was great. But here's something you could do to make it a little bit better, you know? It's
maybe
like
we should learn from that to give constructive feedback,
I think that's more what we're going to come to expect of like, okay, how do I give the compliment sandwich?
Yeah, totally.
It is clearly ChatGPT has learned to play with our egos as well.
Totally,
in a sense.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, I think we can dive into our two last questions, which we always ask to close off the episode. So one of them is kind of relating to the title of our podcast, which is What the Field. What is one thing that has really made you think, what the field, what the fuck has been going on? How is this possible since you've been kind of working in this regenerative space?
It's such a good question and a rich question. I one, have been really surprised at how much stereotype is around the word farmer and how much there is to untangle around that. Probably first and foremost is understanding that a farmer is a business owner and an entrepreneur, not just a grower. I don't know any farmers basically that are only growing and not having to also do all that other stuff. But for some reason, we don't really treat it as full businesses and understand that that is the way that it works. So I think there's a lot more work to really see that as a profession where you are a business owner and the products you're creating are produce of different kinds. That really surprised me because I didn't fully see how deep it goes in terms of it. And I do think subsidies has played a role in that because some farmers haven't had to have a fully, there's been different forces at play in how they grow their businesses. And there's very much a desire right now to be that classic entrepreneur where you're in more control of your business and you know what's happening and you're doing long-term visioning and planning, so on and so forth. And then I would say also the perseverance. Like farming these days with climate change is insane, and that they keep showing up and they keep doing it and keep being committed and keep growing to feed all of us is very humbling. Like it's very moving and very amazing. They have all of my respect, truly.
Yeah, for me, like the question of regenerative agriculture is resilience. Like it's
So resilient.
yeah, and about the kind of being business people and not just growing. I think for so long the question has been on how much did you produce, the yields, etc., just the outcomes at any price. And I think something super special that regenerative agriculture is bringing is, okay, how much is that costing you? How much inputs are you putting in? Because if you have this much yield but at this cost and the balance sheet is negative in the end, then it's not working for you. And I think regenerative agriculture is actually like looking in the whole perspective of the books and saying what comes in, what comes out, from which sources. And I think that's super interesting perspective too.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
That came up for me now? The other thing that surprises me so much, I facilitate a lot of conferences and I speak at a lot of conferences. And the amount of time we spend in community with one another already bought in to also regenerative agriculture, talking about the problem. How much is the problem? How big is the problem? I'm like, we're all educated on the problem. Why are we not spending all of our energy on solutions and collaborating? This has really surprised me. Almost every conference I go to, I hear the same facts repeated. And I'm like, this is like, you don't have to convince
soils.
me. Yeah, you don't have to convince me. I'm convinced. I'm like, what are we doing? How do we keep, again, showing the solutions, the opportunities, the things that inspire and show what is working so we can focus more of our energy there than what's not working? And the same with the amount of time people want to discuss what is the definition of regenerative agriculture. Oh my God.
We didn't ask.
No. But so much. It's interesting that we have these same themes and it kind of feels like we're in a rut of not being able to move beyond it, as opposed to going, it's already happening. Like, how do we support it? And I mean, it's a bigger discussion, but some people are also, how much do we need to control it? Like, versus really stepping into this mindset and a different way of being, which is a very big shift than like you have this exact thing you have to follow. So I find that tension within the industry of the desire to be very clear and control and like have a knowing and an answer versus what regenerative principles are all about don't really mesh. And we haven't found our way forward in that yet. So that's another thing where I'm going like, what the field?
However, I understand the fear of people that are doing great things of others greenwashing.
Totally.
I get it.
It's valid.
Yeah. But in these spaces, I mean, I completely agree that like there's a lot of focus on the definitions. Like I've been asked so many times, but how exactly does like crowd farming define regenerative agriculture? How does it differ from agroecology and what are and like these other names that are surfacing? And it's true that it gets to a point where you're like, but we're all in this already. Like we've all decided that we believe in this. So why does it matter this much?
Yes.
But yeah, of course, greenwashing is a risk as well.
And you have a trusted platform. I know if I buy on crowd farming, you've done extensive quality checks and in line, and you wouldn't have the business you have today if you were not doing it a certain way that customers trust and want to keep buying from. So at some point you're like, do we you need me to answer this again? Like
Yeah. And so in the spirit of also focusing more on solutions and bringing more resources to the table, what is like a book or a film or a song or a podcast or whatever that you would recommend to all of our listeners today to move?
Yes. So I went to RFSI in Brussels a few months ago, and I was surprised that multiple speakers got on stage and read poetry from one of my favorite poets. So I wanted to share his name, and particularly an interview he did that I love listening to. I can just listen to it again and again because it's so lyrical, it's so magical, and it's one of those things that will make you feel different about the world, and just that, like only art can do. And his name is John O'Donohue, and he has one interview with Krista Tippett, who is a phenomenal interviewer from the United States. The show is called On Being. John O'Donohue has now passed, but his work lives on, and just hearing this Irish man read his poetry and talk about his relationship to the land and the landscape, and, you know, if you've been to Ireland, you know it's a very magical kind of mystical place. It's so good. So that would be my... I'm not the only one talking about John O'Donohue, you know. Other people in the space are as well.
Amazing.
He's
Amazing.
awesome.
Well, you know what to do, and so do we.
First time we get poetry as a recommendation. Yeah.
That's true.
He's great. And his book, To Bless the Space Between Us, is amazing as well.
Amazing. Yeah.
We'll take
Super.
that on. Yeah. Great. Well, I think that's it. Thank you so much, Analisa. It's been such an amazing conversation. I think we've touched on so many different things, and it's a lot of food for thought. I feel like I have some stuff to process now.
Thank you for all the work you guys do and giving farmers the opportunity to get to more people more easily. Because going back to, again, building logistics and supply chain and everything, there's full businesses devoted to that, and yet we often expect the farmer to carry all of it. So thank you for being such a great source of support.
Thank you for giving visibility to farmers. We're on the same
We're on the same mission.
journey. Yeah.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.